What I've done is created a little bit of a scenario of each report that you can read through and go through. And basically, this type of report that I've built is for essentially science group managers. And they, in this example, received reporting on a semi-annual basis via Excel. Finance produced the report, and it was highly complex. It had a number of business rules that needed to be put into Excel. So the managers were unable to review the current grant and their grant and funding amounts easily, and it was often very difficult to read. And so the Power BI solution, essentially what we do is those steps: load the data, and we've used Excel for some supplementary data, we've built the data model, and we've visualized the solution. So I'm just going to go through each of the pages that I've built for that. Generally what we do is when I build a Power BI report, I use the DAR method, and that stands for dashboards, analysis, and detail. And you can actually sort of see that in my pages. What I call is the dashboard page is like the 1-minute view, where someone wants to go into the report and just see how things are tracking, and if it's all good, they just continue on with their work. But if they need to go to the next level or see an issue, they go into the analysis part of it, and then they can slice and filter and see whether that issue is. And finally, what they can do is to drill into the detail. And so what I find is for an effective Power BI report is that we do those 3 levels, the high end, the analysis end, but then we need to allow end users to drill into the detail and say, oh, that's the problem. Who do I need to contact? And create actionable data for customers here. So let's go straight into it here. What I have is a dashboard, and you can see here essentially three visualizations. I've got what I call a waterfall visualizations, where I can show all of the funding components, so all the increase components here, and I can show all of the expense components and have an outstanding amount. So the total funding amount really is this total amount here. You can see my rollover shows that total amount. I've also got what I would call a net movement, and in this example I've got not only a grant net movement, and so you can see what my grant net movement is, and so this is what it's remaining, but I also have in this example a discretionary part. So some organizations have discretionary funding for that. And the last part of that is I have just a list of grants and their net position. In terms of the functionality, it's very much click and have selections. So for instance, if I wanted to see what my colleague Travis, what group he looks after, well, he looks after 6. So you can see all the detail change when I've looked at groups, chosen him. Or if I'll choose myself as the leader, you can see there that I've got 2 groups I look after, group 1 and group 2. So I can look at group 1 and see some detail there. So if we look at this in a bit of detail, we can see for my group 1, between April and May, I have got some discretionary funding change, and it's quite actually a large change. If I actually select my income, you can then see this discretionary income and see within May that there's a movement up there. So that's something to note, and we may look at that later. Okay, so I'll just click out of there. If I look at group number 6, if I flick to group number 6, I'm looking and I'm going, if I look at my net movement, I notice in June, July, well, in July, I've got a lot of grant expenses and wonder why that's happening. So let's make a note of group 6 and go, well, let's look in detail of what's happening there. I can actually look at the salary and wages, and you can see here in my grant funding, you can see a massive decrease. And we want to work out what that is from. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll go down, and if we looked at, let's look at this group 6, we can then go into our grant analysis. And so for group 6, you can see here that I've got some funding here. And let me just go back here. And you can see here that in July for my group funding, I've got these expenses. So this is just showing me the income and the cost month on month for the year of 2019. And you can see the massive group in the grant, the massive drop in the grant position in July. Well, I can actually select July and go, well, let's just show me the numbers in July. And so I can see, oh, well, for that grant, look at my grant income, and I've got some negative income in my grant. So what's that from? And so I can actually go in and right click on that and say, show me what the detail, the transaction detail is for that grant, or the negative of 9,000. And then you can see here the detailed transactions come through. And with my descriptions, oh, I can see there's some reallocation transactions that have come through that have made up that that transaction there. Look through from the detail, from an analysis point of view, and then drilling through into the detail to see that. So managers can go from the high end to the low end and answer their own questions rather than having finance or other reporting people go back and look at that. If we go now to that discretionary example that I had, and so I think for the discretionary example in MRI Group 1, there was, and I can flick back to my dashboard here, for MRI Group 1, that there was an increase in May. So if I come back to my group analysis, which has a tabular format of the grant and discretionary amounts, I can then go into May and go, let's look at May. And so what was that increase for? There's a huge increase here of $90,000 that really wasn't there for any other periods. If I right click onto that and drill through into that, I can then see the details of the contributions. And so again, I've put in some fancy descriptions of what that increase is, and that 90,000 there ties back to the 90,000 here in the discretionary income. So all in all, what I can see is a total view from both my grants and also from my discretionary funding, which is my non-grant funding. And a group, a science group manager or leader would be able to quickly go in, look at the front dashboard and do a couple of selections to work out if there's anything that they need to look into more detail, go into the detail and select the detail here, and then drill into the transaction detail in the end. I hope that makes sense with this example. The last thing that's here is essentially a grant summary that I've created. So within this system, there is further details about the grant, and so we can look at the grant position, the total to date costs when it's ending, and so there's more non-financial based data that we can actually look at. And so here's a year-on-year part of that. So with this grant funding report, I'm hoping that you can see that you can get an end-to-end view of how each grant works, look at any details of it, and then drill into the details. So your end users, who aren't necessarily finance users, can easily and quickly see what that's there. As I said, I can go directly into a grant and select a grant, go into a P&L category, and so I can roll up my P&L categories or roll them down